Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Today, we have the pleasure of having Geoffrey Lipman with us, who's the brains, the mind, the energy behind the SUNx program. And we're thrilled to have him here. And we want to talk a little bit about COP30, what SUNx is doing right now, and what's ahead. So Geoffrey, all eyes have been on Bellum for the last week in Brazil. What were some of the takeaways you saw from COP30, and what message do you have for COP?
Well, these are necessary sort of staging points for the world community, if I can use that term, to be responding to something as massive as climate change. So from that perspective, you need to have these events, and they're this one, as far as I can see from several thousand miles away, is doing what it should do, which is setting long-term goals, checking to see how individual countries are aligning themselves with those goals. And that's one of the main purposes of Bellum is countries are reporting back on the big adjustments that they're making to their energy supply, to their transportation, to their infrastructure, in their own strategic planning. And then they're bringing that to this big event in Bellum, which is targeted around responding to the climate crisis. And then they'll go away, and there'll be a lot of events going around at Bellum, what I call trade show events, basically. And then there'll be another one next year, and there'll be another one the year after. And in that way, this is how we have traditionally responded to these big global challenges. Polycrisis, I think, is the buzzword now. These crises which are so important that we can't afford to ignore them, even though we don't have the means to deal with them.
Was there anything you heard from COP30 this year that stuck out for you, or really was a new thought or a direction that encouraged you?
Not so much from COP30 itself, but a little bit more in the thinking that we've tried to do around this COP and climate and tourism framework. If I can put it in a nutshell, it's going to happen one way or another. Everything is going to slowly get worse between now and 2030 and now and 2050 because there aren't enough response systems to these big geospatial things that are happening and which have been happening for the past 100 years, and we're just now, sort of in a process of responding to them. So in preparing for that, we started to think our generation and younger people than me, we aren't geared to fix this problem. What we're geared to is to continue to doing these same responses like COP, and to sort of move the framework a little bit each year to be better able to deal with them in what is now 25 years into the future. And against that background, what we'd concluded is there is some hope if we can look to our next generations, our kids and our grandkids, and give them some tools now that might help them, when they're in the decision-making framework in 25 years, 30 years' time. And that tool is AI. And the reason I say they can deal with it is because my generation and younger people than me, that we're just at the start of the AI revolution. Everything that I read and everything that cleverer people in that field than me tell me is this is the same kind of start that we had when Microsoft produced its first, Bill Gates produced the first variant of Microsoft Office, and people were experimenting with it. Now, we can use Microsoft Office without thinking about it. Our kids and our grandkids will be using AI that way, and AI itself will have evolved massively because it's capable of regenerating itself, and because there's so much now global realization of this, that maybe when we get to 2030, our kids and our grandkids, with the AI tool, will be able to find ways to respond to the climate crisis that makes living possible.
One of the things I'm encouraged by with AI is there are so many companies, so many organizations working to improve the AI so that it does enable people to make smart decisions and evolve. This leads nicely to what you're doing at SUNx. So let's step back. Tell me a little bit about what you're working on SUNx right now.
We're working at consolidating the climate friendly travel communities that we've been seeding around the world for the past 5 years. We are active with chapters in 64 countries now, mostly countries of the global south, small island developing states and least developing states. We have initiated an education system, a postgraduate diploma. We train the people, and then the young people, they do all of this online now, because we started it during COVID, so we had to do it online. And then after they've had a year of very intensive learning, they then become chapter leaders in their own countries. And that's kind of one pillar of what we're doing. We're training people and making them into chapter leaders and saying, build chapters in your own countries. And parallel with that, we've established a registry for companies. So companies who say, yes, climate friendly travel makes some sense to us. Change our behavior to take account of the climate, to take account of sustainable development, and to take account of nature positive solutions. And that's it. If we get companies who are saying that's what we should do, we are putting them into a community framework where they will become local leaders of this activity. So that's basically where our focus has been. And our longer term plan is to get a group of travelers, a growing group of travelers, who kind of have this same idea and say, yeah, these are the kind of places we want to go to. These are the kind of companies that we want to have as our travel partners, our travel hosts, and our chapters will help to make all that happen. And that's what we've been doing, and we continue to do that. The big new idea that we've focused on, it goes back to the last point that we talked about. It's what we call Dodo4Kids. And Dodo4Kids is it's a gamification. It's aimed at those people who are in the age group early learners, 5 to 12, and it's families on holiday. It's the same people when they're back home and they're thinking about holidays, and they're just having family time together. And we've created an entire system based on the idea that a dodo, which is the last species that was made extinct by humans, comes back, is actually reincarnated in a lab in Malta with a kind of crazy scientist. And this dodo doesn't want humankind to go the same way as his species. So he travels to different countries, different cities. He meets a couple of local kids, and together they learn about the incredible tourism potential in their countries. And then they also learn at the same time about the threats from sea level rise, if it's a coastal location, the threats from heat, which is going to be a threat everywhere, the threats from drought, all of the climate accentuated threats that the scientists have been telling us this is what you have to be prepared for and build a response to. And so we're building that response. We have some real fun. It's fun. It's not serious, heavy stuff. It's all fun learning for the kids with this somewhat wacky dodo and a relatively wacky professor. And they go and they learn and they explore, and things happen to them. And we think this can be a totally new departure in the usual cycle of what is called tourism education. We think it's a whole new group of potential travelers. It's engaging them with their families, and it's using the modern concepts. And last point I should make, and going back to the earlier thread of this discussion, we're doing this stuff with AI. The books are generated by AI, the website is AI supported, and we will weave AI into these stories so that the kids can realize it can be useful in helping to produce the kind of I call it green and clean travel for the future.
I think one of the amazing things about Dodo4Kids is that you've taken all aspects, AI, like you talked about. It involves companies, it involves governments, it involves consumers, parents, and the youth. Where do you see the drivers of change right now? Is it at the corporate level? Is it at the consumer level? At the corporate or government? Where's the driver right now, and how do we get everybody involved?
Yeah, I think the challenge, Paul, is I could easily say, oh, it's realization of the climate crisis. It's realization that AI can be helpful. It's none of these things individually. It's the combination of them and stepping back and saying, if we can't deal with that, how can we make a framework that will help our kids to deal with it and our grandkids to deal with it? And so it's many individual things. I mean, the weather. What could be a better sign that the scientists are right than the increasing heat? People and the heat, on the Hajj pilgrimage last year, 1,000 people died from heat exhaustion. Old people are hugely susceptible to heat when they're at home or when they're traveling. So those realities are going to focus people's attention. And then, in combination with that, you cannot turn on your computer, look at your mobile phone, watch your television without seeing some new AI development, massive AI investment, governments developing AI strategies. So if you put those two things together, that's how we came up with Dodo4Kids.
This is the time of year you hear people make predictions and look ahead on what are the issues going to be top of mind. I'd just like to take a minute to ask you, what are some predictions? What are you seeing for the year ahead?
I think there's going to be a lot of the same, same trade shows, same summits. Nobody puts out a meeting that they don't call a summit. I have an idea that one day I want to host a low-level meeting and see how many people actually come. So there's going to be more of that noise. We're going to become completely more and more locked into social media, into looking at podcasts, into communicating this way. And I think as far as tourism is concerned, the same big trends are going to continue. It's going to be slightly greater increase than the increase in the economy generally. It's going to create more jobs than than other sectors in the economy produce, as it traditionally has. It's going to have more entry jobs for women and more opportunities for women as we expand. We're going to see a lot more about tourism in Africa because that's the uncharted territory, and it's finally beginning to get some good transportation links. China is going to be a dominant player in this world, and I think hopefully, I'm hoping that we will be able to, create just a small niche in this with our Dodo4Kids, and that will become a growing part of this system going forward.
Do you have some words of wisdom for those involved in COP31 next year?
I'm not sure that I have words of wisdom anymore. If you ask my wife if I've got any words of wisdom, Paul,
I suspect you do.
I would like to see them step back and say, how could we do this in a way which is different than the way we have traditionally done it? And again, I'm harping back to my theme. How can we channel this potential for the next generation into something more than just a talk shop? Maybe we can identify some major projects which could be supported at the COP, could be funded by it doesn't have to be money from the climate side, it's money from the development side, money which is going to small island states, and that we start some model programs, and particularly in the world's poor countries, the ones who are the most exposed to the extreme weather, the ones who are the least capable of dealing with it. You look what happens when a hurricane hits a Caribbean island. Antarctic ice shelf slips into the ocean and the sea level rises 9 feet, the scientists tell us, or more. And, whole countries begin to be submerged. What was tourism phenomena become no longer operable at all. So I think we should be looking at maybe the COP could produce some next generation projects which are identified, and then the tourism community, I hope, could rally around this and help provide funding for them.
How can organizations get involved in Dodo4Kids?
Well, they contact us. We are an open organization. We talk to anybody. We make SDG 17 cooperative agreements with people. We don't just expect people to come along and say, oh, we want to support your program. This has to be a sort of win-win mutual thing. So, for example, the Pacific Asia Travel Association, PATA, is very strong in building sustainable, they call it meaningful tourism, in the Asia Pacific region. So we make an arrangement with them. We sign a very simple SDG 17 agreement. That's under the Sustainable Development Goals. SDG 17 is called Partnership for the Goals, and it's within that framework. And then we say, how can we help you advance your goals in the Pacific Asia region? And they say, how can we help advance the movement of the Dodo4Kids in the region? And this is, I use that case because it is a specific case. We've signed such an agreement with PATA, and we're both promoting this around the COP developments at the moment.
Geoffrey, thank you so much for your insight and tell us more about Dodo4Kids and talking COP30 with us. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Paul. As ever, it's as long as I've known you, it's been a pleasure to exchange views with you. Mostly
Likewise.
not as public as this, but I value our relationship very much, and I appreciate the fact that you've asked me to do this.
Well, I think it's interesting. We became friends and colleagues over the 2004 tsunami. We've seen a lot of change. We've seen a lot of things that haven't changed. So I think going forward, we're optimistic that things will continue to improve. It just takes time.
Yeah, I recall that very well. I was then Assistant Secretary General at UNWTO. I flew there from Davos, from the World Economic Forum, and had been engaged in discussing the tsunami from a distance with people who were not mostly not tourism people. And then I came straight to that meeting, and it focused. I think it was in Phuket, if I'm not mistaken. And it was the first time that I'd met you. You were a senior VP for Visa for the Asia Pacific region. And what I was impressed by at that time was you were very direct and very knowledgeable about the region. And I was not knowledgeable about the region, so I learned a lot. And as you say, I think sometimes in those kind of events you bond with people, and I think we started to build a bond then, which is for which has lasted this time. And really, I'm admiring what you're doing and what you have done, and I hope this friendship continues, for a few more years, if I have a
I
few more years.
I feel the exact same. And what I loved about the work we did back then is it showed that governments and people and communities and companies can work together to make a difference. The tourism recovery that we saw in Southeast Asia following the tsunami was phenomenal. And it was in no part due to everybody working together.
Well, UNWTO had a very good convening power, and we were ready in that phase, to go where it mattered. It was necessary to be in the region, in one of the places which had suffered, and it was necessary to sort of open the door and say, if you can help, if you're interested in working with us, come and do it. And I remember we sat around a table. There was no head table, and we all had a common challenge. And one last point, Paul. This is really important in today's world. We were all motivated by doing the right thing, by doing things decently. And in a world today where so much is motivated by doing things for self-serving reasons, and I'm not going to go down any pathway on that, but it was good to just meet like-minded people, work hard with them, break bread with them in the evening, and build friendships, and that's how I remember we were from those first times.
Absolutely. It shows the importance of bonds that can really make a difference. Jeffrey, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul.